Well, as promised, I told you the last class we would do a presentation of a bucket list trip that me and Gina and five other Christian couples went on in November. This is the ship, the Norwegian Epic. It was built and completed in France in 2010, and at that time, it was the largest cruise ship in the world. It's 1,081 feet long and can hold 4,100 passengers. It has 19 decks, 20 dining options, 20 lounges, 6 swimming pools, 3 water slides, 9 jacuzzis, and 16 elevators. She's powered by a diesel-electric plant with 6 long-stroke Mack engines, providing 79.8 megawatts for ship propulsion and onboard electricity supply. What does that mean? How much power is that? Well, 50 megawatts, about 70% of that, could power and supply 50,000 homes for a year, consuming 24 kilowatt hours per day. How's that? That's pretty incredible. That's our stateroom. That was really nice. It had a balcony. This was a bucket list trip. Where did we go? There were 10 shore excursions and 3 days at sea. Israel was on the itinerary, but unfortunately, the war prohibited that excursion. We were going to cancel the trip, but we had already made all of the arrangements. Everybody else was going, and we got talked into this, and I'm so glad we did. We'll try to cover tonight Rome, Athens, Corinth, Ephesus, Istanbul, and Cyprus. The rest of it we'll have to probably leave. We're not even going to get through this. But I had 1,480 photos and 80 videos. So we'd be here a while if we went through all of that. Rome, Italy, the Trevi Fountain. What's the significance of Rome in the Bible? It came into prominence in the intertestamental period, which is roughly 400 years between the Old and New Testaments. During that time, Israel was under the thumb of the Greek rulers, including Alexander the Great. He, of course, was one of the world's greatest generals, and he ruled for 13 years. After his death at age 33, his empire split into warring factions and kingdoms led by his 4 generals. It's interesting to note that good old Alex believed he was divine, and this caused problems with his generals. The Seleucid Empire followed Alexander the Great's empire, and Antiochus Epiphanes IV, which means God manifest, began to persecute the Jews in earnest. This ruler banished Jewish practices, which led to the Jewish rebellion. Their ultimate act of desecration was their sacrifice of a pig to Zeus in the temple of the Jews. I'd say they got pretty upset over that. So the ruler banned a lot of the Jewish practices, and it was awful. So they did gain their independence, Israel did, that is, in 164 BC from these guys, via the Maccabean revolt, in which the Maccabees, led by Judas and his 5 sons, who were sons of the priestly family of the Jews, handled this through guerrilla warfare. During the time of the revolt, the Maccabees were supported by an up-and-coming Roman general. Can you guess who that is? Pompey. This is in 1 Maccabees 8. There's 4 books in Maccabees, but the history of the oppression of Israel is in those first 2 books, and also in the writings of Josephus, who was a Jewish historian and who recorded and wrote all about the Maccabean revolt and the Jewish war manuscripts. So with the collapse of the Seleucid Empire in 116 BC, Israel enjoyed their own independence until 63 BC, when guess who? The Romans became the empire and they swallowed up Israel. So the Jews were allowed to maintain their religious practices as long as they didn't make trouble for Rome, right? Consequently, Rome placed a series of puppet kings, a.k.a. the Herod family, and the military governors, Pilate, Felix, Festus, over the provinces of Israel. That's how Rome gained prominence. When the Jewish leaders finally determined to put Jesus to death, they had to enlist the help of the Romans, of the Roman authorities, to do it. So Pilate was the Roman governor who finally pronounced the death sentence of Jesus. The Jewish authorities pressured him into doing it by questioning his allegiance to Caesar. You can read about this in John chapter 19, 12 through 16. So there you have it. We've covered 400 years in 5 minutes? There's going to be a final exam at the end of this class. The Trevi Fountain, this thing, was completed in 1762. It's the largest Baroque sculptured fountain in the city and one of the most famous fountains in the entire world. The Trevi refers to 3 roads that meet in that piazza, meaning a public square or marketplace in Italian. There's a myth associated with this fountain. You know what it is? You throw 1 coin in and you will return to Rome. You throw 2 coins in and you will fall in love with an attractive Italian person. You throw 3 coins in and you will marry who you met. How's that? That's a myth that goes back to 1954. So these are the couples. These are 3 of the 5 that were on our trip. The other 2 were a little late getting in there because of some flight delays. Would I want to spend eternity with these Christians? You betcha. They are special. So there were 10 of us, 5 Christian couples who we've known, Gene and I have known for over 25 years. If you go on one of these things, go with other Christians. It is a riot and a blast. And it was a bucket list trip for all of us. The Colosseum was in Rome. Construction there began in 72 AD by the Emperor Vespasian, who died in 79 AD, and his son Titus completed it about 80 AD. It held 50,000. Entry was free. It was used for over how many years? 400 years. It was built by tens of thousands of Jewish slaves, and the Colosseum was the place for execution of criminals and gladiator games. How about the death toll in the Colosseum? It's estimated that over 400,000 people died. That's about 1,000 deaths per year. Gladiators, slaves, convicts, prisoners, and entertainers, including 1 million animals. Many of them exotic. Crocodiles, elephants, leopards, tigers, bears, hippos. The killing of the animals was called venatio, which means hunting. The emperor, who had the best seat in the house, would spear them as sport from his stand. Prisoners were often left alone for these animals as their execution means. To the right, you see the Arch of Constantine. It was dedicated to the Emperor Constantine to commemorate his victory over Maxentius at the Battle of Milvian Bridge in AD 312. There's another picture of the Colosseum. It was rainy that day, but we spent almost the whole day there. And you can see there were 83 platforms. As you go in the Colosseum, there were 83 platforms, and it took 6 slaves to raise the platforms up. You'll see that on the right there. So the audience could witness 83 events simultaneously. So it wasn't just like you see in the movies, right? 83 events. The Roman viaducts, and you can see that in the below. Now, just imagine there's this surface over this, but over the years, all of that just deteriorated. So what you see is where the gladiators and slaves and everybody else were underneath there. And so the Roman viaducts were used to fill the lower level with water to wash away the blood and the smell. And you can imagine how bad that was. There's another picture of it you can see. So the platforms, there's 83 platforms, and you can see they were all up there, and they would be raised up. And wow, what a thing. So that's a close-up of the Arch of Constantine. It's called the Triumphal Arch in Rome. It was to commemorate 10 years of his reign and his victory over the battle. It was dedicated to him by the Roman Senate around 312 AD. Why is it called a triumphal arch? Because that's what victorious military leaders did after they finished a battle successfully. They would march their troops and themselves through underneath the arch as they entered the city of Rome, and they paraded and greeted the crowds. A lot like Macy's parade, right? That's exactly what they did. So there were a lot of arches in Rome. St. Peter's Basilica is a church in Vatican City within St. Peter's Square. The original St. Peter's Basilica was built around the 4th century by the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great. The construction of this one occurred from 1506 to 1626. Traditionally, St. Peter's Basilica is held to be the burial site of St. Peter. I don't know about that, but that's what the tour guide told us. There are around 100 popes that are buried within St. Peter's Basilica. By interior measure, it's the largest church building in the world. The Vatican City is a city-state surrounded by Rome, and it is the headquarters of the Roman Catholic Church. Is the Vatican City considered a country? Yes. It became its own country in 1929 after signing the Lateran Treaty, which was a deal made between Mussolini and the Holy See, and is therefore the smallest country in the world, covering just over 100 acres. That's 1/8 the size of New York City's Central Park. It's governed solely by the Pope and is the Pope's residence. His residence is called the Apostolic Palace. You can see his personal residence, termed the Vatican Palaces, right there in the lower left where I have the arrow. That's where he hangs out. The Vatican City is the product of Italy's greatest artists, among them Raphael and Michelangelo. There were 5 main architects that designed and built it over 120 years. There are 140 statues on the top of those colonnades in front of the basilica, and they're actually portraits of various saints and martyrs. Matthew, St. Thomas, James the Great, John the Baptist, Andrew, John the Evangelist. It's really something to behold. That's part of our crew up there that are smiling. We got lost trying to find this thing. Let me tell you, that was a real trip. There's another shot of St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican City. Well, what is basilica? It's a title of honor given to church buildings that are distinguished either by antiquity or an important historical event or granted special privileges by the Pope. The Pope gives his weekly address on the balcony of his residence, that one where the arrow was pointing. He does that on a weekly basis at noon on Sundays. He appears at this location, and you may have seen this during Christmas time. It's loaded with people there, and he comes out to the dais and he speaks. So on Christmas, Easter, Easter Sunday, and the feasts of St. Peter and Paul, that's where he delivers his speech. Then we went on to Athens. Athens the seaport of Athens is called the Port of Piraeus. It's the largest passenger seaport in Europe and one of the largest passenger ports in the world. Of the 5 million people in Greece, half of them live in Athens. It's Europe's oldest capital city and one of the oldest cities in the world. Athens was named after Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom, and the Athenians were remarkable in their zeal for worshiping other gods, which we'll cover in a few minutes. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Epicurus are just a few of the names of great philosophers and thinkers who lived in Athens, Greece. The city is considered to be the birthplace of Western civilization. Corinth, on the other hand, at the time of Paul, was far larger and wealthier than even Athens. It's 50 miles west of Athens, and if Paul walked, it would have taken him 2 full days, traveling about 25 miles per day to get there. He lived and worked there for 18 months, Acts 18 tells us, verses 11 through 12. So merchant shipping brought wealth to Corinth from both the Aegean and the Adriatic seas. You would find this in just about every stop you came to. It's like a quick stop, right? Instead of potato chips, it was olives. A package of olives were as common as potato chips, and they littered the convenience stores all along the way. That right there are olive groves by the hundreds. We travel 50 miles from Athens to Corinth, and you would see these olive groves all over the place. And they were really good olives, really good. Well, our first stop prior to traveling to Corinth, like I said, was Athens. And after walking from our hotel to the Acropolis, the first order of business was to get lunch. And there's part of our crew there. There's Gina. She's wondering, what is this going to taste like? We ate a lot of different foods over there. The Areopagus. In Acts 17, Paul gave a discourse atop the Areopagus, also known as Mars Hill, which was an outdoor forum for public debate. It's a prominent rock outcropping located about 10 city blocks from the Parthenon, which is on the top of the Acropolis. You can almost see it in the background. You see where all of us are there, right behind us, up above us, is where the Parthenon is. It's behind that structure there where the Temple of Athena is. Ares, the god of war, known to the Romans as Mars, is the Roman name for the hill. So they called it Mars Hill. The Greeks called it Areopagus. It's called the Hill of Ares or Areopagus in Acts chapter 17. Think of it like our own Capitol Hill, right? We refer to it as the Hill in Washington, D.C. That's how this was referred to. Ares was the Greek god of war, and according to Greek mythology, this hill was the place where Ares stood trial before the other gods for the murder of Poseidon's son. I can't pronounce this. Alarotheus. So it's 377 feet above the land below, and not far from the Acropolis and Agora, which is the marketplace you see to the left there. Mars Hill served as the meeting place for court, the highest court in Greece for criminal, and religious matters. It was in this environment that Socrates, back in 470 BC, was convicted of neglect of the gods whom the city worships and the corruption of the young. Even under Roman rule in the time of the New Testament, Mars Hill remained an important meeting place where philosophy, religion, and law were discussed. It was on this hill that Paul addressed the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers. So you can't see us, the picture's hard, but we're up on the top of that thing. And we read out loud the following passage in Acts 17. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them being asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him into a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus right there and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you're very religious." That was very obvious when we went up there. But religious to all these foreign gods. "For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he's not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives life to everyone and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so when they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance. But now he commands all people everywhere to repent, for he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." At that, Paul left the council. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. All that took place right there. It's free, by the way. This is the Parthenon. Its height is 45 feet. Its width is 101 feet. Its length is 228 feet. It has Doric columns. They're 6'2" in diameter and they're 34 feet high. It was dedicated to the goddess Athena during the 5th century BC, and it served as a model for the British Museum and the Lincoln Memorial. So if you've seen the Lincoln Memorial, you see it's the same type of design. The hand-carved statues and friezes depict scenes that were familiar to all of the ancient Greeks. Oops. There's another shot of it, a little closer. This is the Acropolis when it's lit up. It's at night. It's like downtown New York, and you can see it from a long way away. So what surrounds the Acropolis? That is a beautiful sight. Plaka is the oldest and most beautiful neighborhood in Athens and is clustered around the slopes of the Acropolis. It is absolutely stunning to look at this. You can see the water in the background and the ships and the mountains. It's quite beautiful. Pretty crowded, too. That's another pic from another view, other side of the Parthenon. And yet another one. It's the highest point in Athens. That's a picture of the Temple of Zeus that's being restored. It's under restoration right now. That's the porch of the maidens. It's the Temple of Athena, and it was primarily dedicated to the goddess Athena. There's a whole history behind all of these that we don't have time to get into. That is the Odeon, and in Greek that means singing place, of Herodias Atticus. It was built by him in honor of his Roman wife, Aspasia, in 161 AD. Scott, are we going to build our wives one of these? No? Okay, you already did it. It's a stone Roman theater structure on the southwest slope of the Acropolis, and it was used as a venue for music concerts, and it would hold roughly 5,000 people. Well, when the touring gets tough, the tough go get ice cream. And we went to the Mona Lisa ice cream parlor, of course. It was so good. And then we had a tasty and lively Greek dinner at Efshari with Zorba the Greek being performed. And that's all of us there in the middle. And this guy on the right, there was one mandolin player, or whatever that instrument is called. I think it is a mandolin. And then another guy with a rhythm guitar. On to Corinth from Athens. You can see in the map there how far apart they are. Corinth is located about 49 miles west of Athens, and it took us about 2 hours to get there because of all the traffic. See, the Corinth Canal was a huge deal. It connected the Gulf of Corinth in the Ionian Sea with the Sarconic Gulf and the Aegean Sea. You can see that from the arrows on the right. And the isthmus, which is what that's called, right? It's land which connects two bodies of water. It's 4 miles in length. It saved ships a 300-mile journey around the Cape. Before construction of the canal, ships were dragged on wheel carriages across a stone-paved road which was greased with animal fat. Is that crazy or what? The work on the canal began under Nero in 54 AD, but it was completed in 1893, and about 11,000 boats travel through it a year. The canal has been closed on numerous occasions due to landslides and the attacks by Hitler under Operation Hannibal in 1944. The Bremer, the ship right there, made history in 2019 when she became the first ship to ever traverse the canal with as little as 2.5 feet of clearance to get through that canal at the narrowest point of the passage. So here we are in Corinth. That's the Temple of Apollo. The temple is just to the left of the Archaeological Museum of Ancient Corinth. Who was Apollo? He was recognized as the god of archery, music, and dance, truth and prophecy, healing and diseases, the sun and light, poetry, and more. One of the most important and complex of the Greek gods. He was supposedly the son of Zeus and Leto, and the twin brother of Artemis, goddess of the hunt. Well, what happened to Corinth? In 146 BC, it was destroyed by the Roman general Lucius Mummius. In 44 BC, Julius Caesar reestablished Corinth as a Roman colony, and after the Turkish conquest in 1458, Corinth was reduced to a country town. That's what it is today. That's the Archaeological Museum of Ancient Corinth. It was built in 1932 by the American School of Classical Studies, and it was also the seat of the Department of the Archaeological Service of the Ministry of Culture, which was concerned with the protection of antiquities in the province of Corinth until 2004. As for Nero, that guy on the lower left, he was a rascal. He ruled for 13 years, 54 to 68 AD. He persecuted Christians on the grounds that they failed to worship Caesar. He lit the garden parties with the burning carcasses of Christians as human torches. He was known for his murderous cruelty and incredible debauchery. He was responsible for instigating the burning of Rome in 64 AD to make room for his planned palatial complex, and he blamed the Christians for it. Nero has also murdered his mother and his wife and his stepbrother. He committed suicide at the age of 30 after the Senate declared him a public enemy. The museum here was robbed in 1990, believe it or not. The antiquity thieves climbed over the roof of the southwest wing of that museum and broke into the galleries, and they stole 285 ancient objects, marble heads, pottery, glass vessels, figurines, jewelry, and numerous other objects. And so it deprived the Corinthians of 20 centuries of history. They also took 1 million drachmas that were intended for salaries of the museum personnel. In September of 1999, they cooperated with the United States and the FBI, and they found the rascals that stole this stuff. It was in a bunch of homes in Miami, of all places. So that was brought back to them in 2001, later on. Notice a lot of headless statues there. My first question was why? That's because often the bodies of these statues were replaced by the heads of newly sculptured heads of those who came to power, rather than creating a complete statue. I guess that works if you don't have a camera or an iPhone, right? You just take the head off and you put whoever head it is on the body there, and bingo, there you have it. Who knows what we would have seen if they had had cell phone cameras back then. This is the Bema. This is in Corinth. Excavations which began in 1896 have given us almost a complete picture of the town at the time of Paul. The city of Corinth was morally decadent, self-indulged, and cults thrived. The sanctuary of Aphrodite owned more than 1,000 courtesan slaves for sacred prostitution. A courtesan slave was a prostitute with a wealthy or upper-class clientele who attended the court of a monarch or a powerful person. Corinth's moral depravity constantly threatened the Christian community. And so Paul warned them to guard against that in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Paul received strong opposition from several members of the large Jewish community in Corinth, you'll recall. He resolved at that point to devote his full ministry to the attention of the conversion of the Gentiles. This is where it happens, right here. During his stay in Corinth, he was brought before the judgment seat of proconsul Gallio in the accusation of conducting illegal teachings. And according to tradition, right there to the right, you see the Bema. It's just that taller structure on the right there. Paul's trial was conducted there. It's a large elevated rostrum standing prominently in the center of the Roman Forum of ancient Corinth, and from which the city's officials addressed the public. That's where it occurred. Yet the Lord spoke, and this is amazing. The Lord spoke to Paul in Acts 18, 7 through 13. Then Paul left the synagogue and went next door to the house of Titius Justus, a worshiper of God. Crispus, the synagogue leader, and his entire household believed in the Lord, and many of the Corinthians who heard Paul believed and were baptized. One night the Lord spoke to Paul in a vision. Do not be afraid. Keep on speaking. Do not be silent. For I am with you, and no one is going to attack and harm you, because I have many people in this city. So Paul stayed in Corinth for 1.5 years, teaching them the Word of God. While Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews of Corinth made a united attack on Paul and brought him to the place of judgment. This man, they charged, is persuading the people to worship God in ways contrary to the law. What in the world is the message for us out of this? I can think of one thing. God told Paul not to be afraid or silent because he had many people in this morally decadent, sacred prostitution-filled, unholy city. God's view is different than our view. So don't let what's happening around us today discourage you. Perhaps God has many in our city. We may not see it, but he does. And he told Paul, don't be afraid, keep on speaking. That's what I get out of this. That's pretty powerful, right? There's the agora, which really is, it means the marketplace. Paul took up lodging here with the Jewish tent makers, Aquila and Priscilla. They fled from Rome when the Emperor Claudius expelled all the Jews from the city in 49 AD. I think that occurred around Acts chapter, I don't remember. I think it's somewhere between 7 and 12, somewhere around there. So Paul worked with them in the agora. And after 1 year or so, he left Ephesus. Oh boy, we don't have time to get into this, but that's the entrance where Paul would have entered into the marketplace in Ephesus. So you know what we did, man? I was stepping all over him, seeing if I could get in Paul's footsteps. You know, somewhere I was going to step over him. That's what I wanted to do in Jerusalem, but it didn't happen. There's the Acrocorinth, or the Corinthian, or the Corinth Acropolis. That was a climb. 6,700 steps, 57 stories high. You can see it from the right when it looks down at level. And so we climbed up that thing, and that was a walk and a climb to remember. And you know, that's the view of the city of Corinth from the top of the Acropolis. That's pretty cool, isn't it? One of Dan is a retired colonel that went with us on the trip with his wife. And in one of his favorite movies is A Few Good Men. So he got up on this wall, and this is what he had to say.
You need me on this wall.
Oh, well, let me go back and see if I can get this.
You want me on this wall. You need me on this wall.
Okay. Anyway, so it's just south of the city of Corinth, and this peak served as the fortified Acropolis of Corinth for hundreds of years. So why was the Acropolis constructed? Simply because you could see armies coming, and they were coming to conquer you, right? So that's why they posted guards and et cetera up on the top. Another reason was for military strategic purposes. They wanted to maintain control of the Isthmus of Corinth, that canal that we were talking about. Secondarily, but just as important, it was a citadel. It was a castle where people could shelter from danger. These are living columns there. These are all our girls. There used to be columns there. Paul sailed off of this port to Ephesus in 51 AD. At that time, according to Romans 16:1, that's where this was. Kusadasi in Ephesus. Kusadasi is a modern-day town on Turkey's West Aegean coast. Ephesus is the single major reason why Kusadasi is as famous as it is for its tourist destination. The ruins of Ephesus the ruins of Ephesus are located just outside of Kusadasi and are among the best preserved ancient Greco-Roman remains in the world. It's a cruise ship departure point for visiting the classical ruins, which is located about 13 miles south of there. So Ephesus is 13 miles south of Kusadasi. Christians began to spread rapidly around 57 AD from there. Anybody need a Rolex knockoff? Lots of knockoffs in Greece and Italy. Purses, watches, cologne. If it's from the West, there's an imitation. Temple of Domitian. Few Roman emperors have such a damning reputation as this guy. 81 to 96 AD. He was cruel, ruthless, and he was an autocrat and a paranoid psychopath who purged the Senate and impregnated and then murdered his niece. His temple was damnatio memoriae, which is the Latin phrase for condemnation of memory. It means the person's existence should be cut out of history, and it was cut out of history. In practice, it meant removing his name from official records and monuments, such as this temple, and he was assassinated by court officials in 96 AD. The next temple to the right is the Temple of Hadrianus. You recognize any emblems in that photo? You really have to have good eyesight to see that. Let me give you a hint. It's a coffee cup. It's an emblem on a coffee cup. That was the Starbucks logo in 1971. A two-tailed mermaid. Oh boy, we're running out of time. That's a main street in Ephesus. Hey, there's the water closet. Pretty up close and personal, yeah? You can't believe I took a picture of that, can you, to show in Bible class. There's the Fountain of Trajan. It was constructed in his honor, 53 AD to 117 AD. It was built around 104 AD. There's a whole lot of background in this that we simply don't have time to read. But there is one thing I want to show you. These were terraced houses for the very wealthy. They were excavated in 1962. and they were very luxurious. There's wall paintings and frescoes in all of these places that give us insight into lifestyles of the 1st century BC to the 7th century AD. We saw a lot of things there. Namely, there was a lot of pornographic graffiti on these walls, a lot of frescoes with stuff you wouldn't want your children to see. Like I said, Ephesus, Corinth, they were loaded with foreign gods, and it was really bad, right? And it's depicted on a lot of the walls inside of these homes of the wealthy. That's a marble street. It's the main street in Ephesus. It led to the theater of Ephesus. You see that tree on the right? It said, they call that the Judas tree. It's on the road out of the city of Ephesus. And it said that this type of tree is the kind of tree Judas went and hanged himself on. Now, I don't know if that's true either, but they call it the Judas tree. You can see it as you go out of Ephesus. That's that long marble street, made totally, completely out of marble. This is the trade area of Ephesus, called the Tetragoras, again meaning marketplace. This is where Paul set up shop. In Acts 18, the Bible says that he was a tent maker, but it more likely means that he was a leather worker, and in Paul's day, most tents were made of leather. That's pretty incredible. There's the great theater of Ephesus, where the riot occurred in Acts chapter 19, close to that. It'll hold 24,000 spectators. I'm running out of time here. Don't have time to talk to you about that. Istanbul. Istanbul today is in Turkey today, and it was Constantinople in 330. Was that the first or the second bell? Oh my gosh. Well, that's the Hagia Sophia Mosque. That's, the girls had to wear scarves. We had to take our shoes off. I'm so sorry you missed this part. Okay, well, I hate to have you leave, but anyway, thank you for allowing me to teach this class this quarter. Love all of you to death. I appreciate you so much. Your faith is really inspirational to me, and I'm kind of glad I'm done. Love you.